Hey guys, welcome to Solo ReacTalk. Today I'm going to be reacting to Enter Yugoslavia Part 2 Between Two Wars 1929 Part 3 of 3 by Time Ghost History. If you want to check out my previous reactions to other Between Two Wars videos, remember the playlist card will be at the top. Just click on it and be able to access them. If you want to check out the original video as well as Time Ghost History's YouTube channel, remember that the links are in the description below. Yeah. In part 1, Yugoslavia as a nation it's not really stable. There are people who still have their cultural and religious identity that is imbued with such importance compared to the state of Yugoslavia, you know. People are not really recognizing themselves as Yugoslavian people. They're far more identifying themselves with their religious backgrounds and with their cultural backgrounds. So the different regions of Yugoslavia are not united as one. There are still divisions, there are still cultural sects or religious sects that believe that they are superior to the rest of the other cultures and peoples across the country. There's still that economic divide between those who live in the far more developed areas of Yugoslavia compared to those who live in the agricultural and rural areas of Yugoslavia. And the parliamentary system that has been created to try and unify all their people as one is also unraveling at the seams, also due to part from the head of state, who is the king of Yugoslavia. He is also interfering in the political situations that are happening in the legislative arm of government. And it's just creating this toxic situation where I don't know how this is going to be resolved. I just don't see how people are going to let go of their pride, let go of your identity, and try and see each other as one people. You know, is it right? Is it wrong? I don't know. Honestly, I just don't know. This is just something that the people of Yugoslavia, or the different regions that have separated now in our modern era, you know, for them to decide. The people on the ground must decide, what do they want? Do they want to be one nation again, or do they want to stay separate? It's all up to them. But you know, during that time of 1929, I think the politicians failed the people. They failed their people. They were sticking to their identities instead of trying to forge something new, something that would benefit everybody, you know. So yeah, let's continue with part 3 of 3. 3, 2, 1, go.
In January 1929, Yugoslavia is teetering on the brink of total government collapse, and King Alexander is about to seize absolute power. Welcome to Between Two Wars, a chronological summary of the interwar years, covering all facets of life, the uncertainty, hedonism, and euphoria, and ultimately humanity's descent into the darkness of the Second World War. I'm Indy Nidell. This is part 2 of a 2-part series about Yugoslavia in the 1920s. In part 1, we did make a note at the beginning about hateful commentary in the comments, and that we would not tolerate such commentary. You can read what we think about that in our pinned comment before you make such commentary. Right. In part 1, we saw how 3 opposing movements competed for domination of the young country. On one side, the Radical Party, led by Nikola Pasic, want a Serbian-dominated constitutional monarchy centered on Belgrade. The Radicals are sort of associated with King Alexander, but he's also chomping at the bit to take over the country and run it as an absolute monarchy. Opposing both of them is a range of voices calling for federalization from a variety of parties led by, among others, Stjepan Radic, who wants a multi-ethnic federation based on republicanism. In April 1924, when Pasic's minority government collapses after only a month, the king reluctantly asks Davidovic, head of the Democratic Party, to form a coalition government. The king is infuriated when in August, his enemy Radic returns from exile, becomes an active part of Davidovic's government, and espouses anti-monarchical views. Alexander demands Davidovic's resignation, which he turns in, but Alexander refuses to call parliament into session anyhow. The crisis has revealed the bitterness of the parliamentary system. It has also revealed how willing the king is to use his power to appoint and dissolve government. But things take another downturn in October 1925 as the various parties are unable to make compromises and rumors start to spread about an impending coup. Tensions are heightened further when Radic even suggests that the Soviet Union would intervene should such a coup take place. This gives Alexander the excuse to encourage the police to pressure the Croat Republican Peasant Party, HRSS, representatives with charges of communism and treason. Radic is arrested in January 1925 and his party is made illegal.
And as everything is transpiring in Yugoslavia, their neighbors are watching. Italy is like right next door. They're watching all of this happen. And I'm sure Mussolini must be salivating, waiting to see what happens, and should Yugoslavia fall, then he's gonna probably try and invade the country and whoever else is next to Yugoslavia during those times, all the other nations as well. Literally, they smell blood in the water.
When new elections finally take place in February, the radicals are the biggest party with 123 seats. Despite being illegal, though, the HRSS wins 67 seats, and the Democrats come in a distant third with 36 seats. With the HRSS unable to take their seats at first, the bickering radicals and Democrats form a coalition government. In March, under pressure from outside, and in an effort to become acceptable to the royalists, the HRSS drops the Republican in their name to become the Croat Peasant Party, just HSS. But Radic stays in prison until July. When he is released, the HSS is still illegal, but this is no longer being enforced, so they take their seats in parliament anyhow. Radic makes it publicly known and unmistakably clear that he is entering parliament as a Croat, not a Yugoslav. By autumn, the radical Democrat coalition government is faltering again. And then, in a fantastic about-face, and to the shock of pretty much everyone, Radic partners with Pasic and his radicals to form a new coalition government. In November, Radic becomes Minister of Education, and his party holds 5 ministerial posts. Such an unexpected move seems to spell a new future of Croat-Serb cooperation, though it is still more of a semblance of stability. And indeed, more than a year of relative stability follows. But on December 10, 1926, 5 days before his 81st birthday, Nikola Pasic dies. The Radical Party, which was already coming apart, then descends into infighting about his succession. Parliament once again enters various stages of paralysis. Add to all of this that the kingdom's international situation is also starting to look pretty dire.
So they have a parliament that is incapacitated for the moment. They have a king who wants to assert more dominance over his government. And the people, there's nothing that's been said really much about the people on the ground. How do they feel about everything that's going on in their country? But I think, they've just left all that responsibility to those that have been elected into power to deal with the matter. But yeah, it's just bad. It's really just bad. That's why it's always important to have public participation, civic responsibility, to keep your elected officials on their toes, to give them a mandate, so that they don't come up with their own mandates in parliament. They don't come up with their own rules and say that this is the will of the people, when the people never asked for any of this, when the people were never consulted about what do they expect from you as their politician. You know, it's always important to make sure that you keep your politicians in check as civilians in any country, anywhere across the world, because you know your politicians will just bring it upon themselves, thinking that they know best, that they know what to do, they know how to do it, and the people are on my side when you never ask them for their input. So yeah, it's a situation here that I don't know how is it going to be resolved, really.
Other than trying to ensure that Austria and Hungary stay weak enough to not be a major threat again, Britain and France are not really that interested in the region. And despite Mussolini's plans for expansion in the Adriatic, Italy has been taking a conciliatory approach towards Yugoslavia so far.
They are just waiting. This is just a smokescreen, just waiting to see what happens. When you guys implode, that's when they will take advantage.
All started to change back in 1925, when Pasic failed to get the parliament to ratify the Nettuno Convention, which would have allowed Italians to freely migrate into Dalmatia and which gave Il Duce even more of a taste for expansion. So just before Pasic dies, Mussolini signs the Treaty of Tirana with Albania, which more or less co-opts the Albanian armed forces to the Italians. Should Mussolini make real his eastward expansion plans, the Yugoslav kingdom is now in a potentially very dangerous situation. The tension on the foreign and domestic scenes compounds into further chaos and comes to a violent head in June 1928. There had been new elections in September 27, which once again failed to produce a clear mandate for any party. The radicals, with SLS and JMO support, form a minority coalition, but an opposition coalition topples them. With parliament in stalemate and Pasic dead, Radic is asked to form a government in February 1928, but he can't unite enough support. Instead, a new radical government is scraped together. But the situation is now getting so paralytic once again that even Radic joins the call for a neutral leader. In other words, a dictator to steer the nation through this parliamentary mess. The partisan rhetoric keeps on getting...
And let me guess who that dictator is going to be. The king. It has to be the king. There's no one else.
more and more toxic and insidious. Party affiliate newspapers attack rival parties with increasingly bloodthirsty language, and death threats appear even in print. Personal insult becomes the standard method of debate. At one point, Radic publicly calls one political opponent a crybaby with a pumpkin head, leading one radical deputy to shout on June 19th that if he continues with his insults, his head will fall right here. It does not take long for threats to turn into action. During a debate on June 20th, Puniša Račić, a Radical Party deputy, leader of the paramilitary Chetnik movement, and proponent of a law permitting armed duels between parliament members, is challenged over Chetnik plundering of Muslim landlords. Račić offers an inflammatory response, declaring that Serbian interests have, when guns and cannons were not shooting, never been more imperiled than now. And gentlemen, I, as a Serb and a parliamentary deputy, tell my nation and fatherland openly that I will use other weapons too, which must protect the interests of Serbdom. Chaos erupts, with loud protests from Radic and the rest of the HSS. As parliament descends into a screaming match, Račić draws his revolver and opens fire on Radic and 4 other Croat deputies. 2 die instantly, and Radic is rushed to hospital where he dies August 8th. Later known as the Skupština crime, the parliamentary crime has dire consequences for the entire parliamentary system. If there was any room left for Croat and Serb politicians to cooperate, the shots fired killed that too. The rest of parliament, and many in the public, now blame the Radical Party as a whole. The country slides deeper and deeper into crisis. There are renewed talks of territorial amputation with a division of the state between Croatia and Serbia, and yet another government falls apart. On December 1st, 1928, its 10th anniversary, the kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes is pushed yet another step towards the brink of total disaster when anti-Serbian student protests break out in Zagreb. The students hang black flags of mourning from the cathedral and demonstrate while chanting, "Down with Belgrade and the present government. Long live free Croatia. Long live the Peasant Democrat Coalition." The police crack down on the demonstrators, and in the battle that follows, several are killed. Now the talks of a breakup of the country take on a more concrete form. When yet another government collapses on December 30th, 1928, Vlatko Maček, Radic's successor, declares support for autonomy for Croatia.
This is just terrible. I don't like dictators. But it just seems that it might be the only way to control the situation. Really, if Yugoslavia is to continue, maybe a dictator is required as an emergency measure, but I just don't know. This is so hard. This is really hard. Maybe they also should just separate and stay separated. I don't know. I mean, if the youth are chanting this, that they want to have this free Croatian nation, they want to be separated from Yugoslavia, then I don't know how are we going to reconcile this divisions, if young people are the ones who are now also championing this division. It's a serious problem. It's a really serious problem. And what makes it even worse is that Parliament itself has gone through such a traumatic situation, and the leadership there is, they're not there on the ground talking with the people. They are not there trying to quell whatever situation is going on. They are stuck in their own little bubbles and, just doing as they please there, instead of trying to deal with the situation so it doesn't escalate any further. They're divided in their little camps still, even after such a terrible situation like this happened in Parliament. I just don't see any other way, really. Maybe a dictator is required, yeah.
Well as Slovenia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Montenegro, and Vojvodina. On New Year's Day, he again calls for the federalization of Yugoslavia and reorganization into national districts. Alexander, who's been away from all this during an illness, now takes extreme measures to solve the crisis. He tells a close political ally that, "I have evidence that they want to break up and cut up the state. Can we look peacefully at all that? Can all that destructive action be stopped and prevented with peaceful means? We have no choice but to resort to the most radical measures in the resolution of our internal political crisis, and to postpone the importance of the Constitution for a certain period as the only possible solution." In the afternoon of January 5th, the Royal Court Chancellery issues a statement which declares that there is no possibility for any kind of parliamentary solution whatsoever which might guarantee the maintenance of full state and national unity. That same evening, the king summons a small group of politicians to be sworn into his new government. The next day, his dictatorship is officially proclaimed. Alexander states to his people that,
Is that the king there? He doesn't look like how he used to in his pictures, when he was younger. Yeah, he looks like he's already stressed, tired, maybe. But yeah, Indy Nadal did say he was ill for some time, so maybe that's why. Yeah, he looks very haggard.
the hour has come when there can and may no longer be any intermediaries between the people and the king. We must seek new methods of work and open new paths. Because of that, I have decided, and I decide, that the Constitution of the Kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes of the 28th of June 1921 ceases to be valid. The parliamentary experiment is over, and the king immediately tries to forge a single Yugoslav identity. Historian Christian Axbo Nielsen gives us some insight into this goal, stating that in Alexander's grand vision, one glorious Yugoslav identity would rule supreme in his kingdom, from the mountain valleys of Slovenia in the northwest to the impoverished and isolated villages of Kosovo and Macedonia in the southeast. This is, of course, quite a big leap from his previous commitment to Serbdom pre-World War I. It is likely that his bearing witness to the constant bickering of various identities throughout the decade has now convinced him that for his people to modernize, they must leave their tribal loyalties behind. New laws are passed which ban associations with tribal or religious titles. All political parties are dissolved, and politicians are placed under full-time police surveillance. Alexander also begins to crack down on corruption. Laws are passed which promise harsh sentences and fines should officials be anything but neutral professionals in their administration.
Yes, they can be those like strict rules and laws that are created by the king to try and unify his people, telling them to cancel out your identity politics, cancel out your cultures and your traditions and your religions. You are now a Yugoslavian. You are not just a Serbian, you're not just a Croatian, you're not just a Slovenian. You are now a Yugoslavian, you know. However, I should also warn him that, you know, don't try and force it down people's throats to such an extent where you tell them that they should not practice their religions, they should not be a proud Serbian or Croatian or Slovenian. You know, you can tell them that you can be multiple things at the same time. You know, you don't have to be one identity for the rest of your life. You can be multiple identities in your life. You know, nothing is set in stone. Nothing is to be put into a box. You are a person and you have multiple life choices and life decisions that identify who you are. You know, so yes, celebrate being a Yugoslavian as well as being a Croatian or a Slovenian or a Serbian, you know. Nationally, you are Yugoslavian. But in your provincial or your state regions, you are part of this group of people, you know. Yeah, it will be very complicated and very difficult to try and put that into practice, though. You know what I've just said, it would be very, very difficult.
Strict instructions not to be influenced by any personal, tribal, or religious factors. Money is tight, however. The economy has been in recession since 1926, and the Great Depression only makes things worse. This gets in the way of the Unitarian dream, as the cash-strapped government is unable to even afford the printing of standard Yugoslav textbooks for schools. See, still in 1929, current textbooks are not standardized, with many students in former Habsburg imperial lands using books from where Serbia is either ignored or outright denounced.
This is a problem. This is a very big problem. And this is why the youth are also taking up into this identity politics of saying, I am a Serbian and that's it, or I am a Croatian and that's it. I don't recognize Yugoslavia. I don't recognize my fellow brothers and sisters across the length and breadth of the nation. I am this, and this is me only, you know. So that's also a problem. That's probably should have been one of the first things that the king should have tried to change as soon as possible. But because there's no money, there's an economic downturn, therefore we must look for other solutions to try and educate people on the future of the nation, you know. Yeah.
The biggest of the changes comes on October 3rd, 1929, with the law on the name and division of the kingdom into administrative regions. From now on, the state would be known as the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. In one sense, this is not so much of a change, because it was commonly referred to it as such already. But it carries huge symbolic weight. The Radical Party had passionately rejected the name when the kingdom was first founded and insisted on Serbs being referred to individually and primarily. The official designation of Yugoslavia has now pushed these tribal markers to one side and emphasized the unitary state. The law also introduces the Banovina system, which divides the kingdom into 9 new provinces, each one carefully drawn to ignore boundaries between ethnic groups and old borders. All the provinces are named after natural features, mainly rivers, and are claimed to offer greater decentralization. This is not exactly true, though. The king still holds all the cards, and while provinces can officially control matters that are not of national importance, Belgrade has a tendency to attach national importance to almost everything. So, in his first year as dictator, Alexander makes some pretty fundamental changes. There also appears to be a great deal of optimism. After the constant squabbling and crises of the 1920s, parliamentary democracy has, well, let's just say, a less than golden reputation. Alexander's government is also making active efforts to shore up further optimism, organizing high-profile fealty delegations where ordinary citizens travel to Belgrade to proclaim their loyalty to the king. Peasants.
Yeah, okay, that's good too, I guess. I was thinking maybe like organizing sports events, something that involves the people on the ground, have some sort of like a cultural event where you unify all the different cultures and make a whole new culture of Yugoslavia, or have festivities that showcase different regions of Yugoslavia in different areas, small towns, villages, cities, where people come to these cultural events, they participate, they learn more about their brothers and sisters further down south or in the north or east or west, They have these open dialogue discussions amongst each other, be comfortable with each other, understand each other as much as possible. Hold football tournaments. Well, I don't know if football was a famous sporting event in Yugoslavia during that time. I don't even know what was a famous. I think football was famous, though. I really do think so. So yeah, hold a football tournament or an athletics tournament that involves all the 9 provinces, where they send their best sports people, men and women, to come and participate in some sort of event that tries to unify the people under Yugoslavia. Whoever becomes the winner, first, second, and third places, they get medals that represent their country. Something that is nation building. Yeah. Swearing fealty, that's also good, but it kind of feels like it's medieval kind of ceremony, where the lords come to field loyalty to their king. Yeah, it's okay, but I just want something that deals with the people on the ground as well, the normal civilians, the people who are not important. Those are the ones that you must convince first that this is Yugoslavia. The important ones, those ones, they usually care about themselves and care about their ambitions. And those are the ones that are dangerous, because they are the ones who convince the people on the ground that this is what you want. You want us to be separated. You want us to be away from those people. You want us to fight against them, to defeat them, and then we have our own little enclave, So, yeah, the king should have also tried to focus more on involving the people on the ground. That, guys, let's have this new identity. Let's have this new culture that we are creating together. Yeah, something like that.
Read loving messages which emphasize the national oneness of Yugoslavia, thanking Alexander for his work. The delegations are on an enormous scale, and they receive well-planned and well-organized favorable treatment in the press. On December 17th, the day after the king's birthday, over 1,000 of these delegates arrive at the royal court. And yet, still, there are dark clouds on the Yugoslav horizon. the dictatorship is struggling to get a hold on the economy. And rumors abound that the king himself is unhappy with the results so far. In December, police discover a Croat separatist plot to attack a train transporting fealty delegates to Belgrade. Vladko Macek is tied up with it and is charged with providing financial assistance to a terrorist group. Away from actual violence, certain officials also find some of the Croats' placidity troubling. Many people in regions such as Dubrovnik haven't exactly denounced the regime. They haven't supported it either. Local leaders always seem to magically disappear into remote villages whenever Yugoslav activities and festivals are organized, leading one inspector to conclude that experience tells us that masses who are silent do not think positively.
You see what I was saying about leaders? They have their own ambitions, they have their own pride, their own aspirations. They are not there for the best interest of the people on the ground and for the country as a whole. They are not there for that. They are there for their own interests. So, the king has to focus on the people, not their leadership. Cut that out. Cut out the middleman and talk directly to the people. Try and unify those people, because if you can unite them, if you can convince them that this is a project that will succeed for many generations of the people of Yugoslavia, if you can convince them, then these leaders will have no power. They will have no authority to try and coerce people to say that you don't want this future, you want my future, you want this little enclave or this little country that we will create, So yeah.
Strict Unitarian policies have also led to tensions with the Catholic Church, Orthodox Church, and Islamic institutions. In short, it is difficult to know how Alexander's grand vision will play out. What we do know is that so far, the Yugoslav experiment has turned out to be an ethnic boxing ring. Unlike many of the other new nation-states of Europe after World War I, the kingdom is not struggling with other states about land and identity. Instead, it is consuming itself in a desperate attempt to find common identity between peoples that seem hell-bent on seeking out opposition and dominance over each other. In many ways, in 1929, the land of the South Slavs is a microcosm that echoes and amplifies the tune of mutual death and destruction that has been playing for over 15 years now, and to which most, if not all of Europe, seems unable to stop dancing. If you'd like to learn more about Serbian history, over on the Sabaton History channel, I did an episode with the Sabaton guys on the defense and the fall of Belgrade during the First World War. And you'll be able to check that out here in a few seconds. Our Patreon supporter of the week is Jonathan Brookins. Thanks to people like Jonathan, we have the finances to make this excellent content. So please support us at patreon.com or timeghost.tv. Chevali, Nastravi. See you next time.
Okay, guys, that was Enter Yugoslavia Part 2, Between Two Wars, 1929, Part 3 of 3. Yeah, it's difficult ruling a nation. Whether you are part of a democratic institution or you're part of a dictatorship of some sort, it's just difficult trying to unify people who were never unified before. It's difficult to identify yourself as this person, but also at the same time, I'm this person, It's difficult to find common ground, especially when other people are not really keen on finding common ground. They want it all. They want everything. They want to see themselves as the important ones when it's not about you anymore. It's about the entire nation. It's about every single person who lives in its borders. And that is your responsibility as a leader, to take care of everybody, not just your own little enclave, you know. And trying to also be like a circular state that promotes people to continue to respect your traditions, practice your religion, but also understand that you are now part of something bigger than just your community. You are now part of a nation. Is very difficult. It is very difficult. It takes a lot of work to stay as a secular state, especially if you have a nation that has got a dominant religion, you know, and the government tries to promote a secular state, but that dominant religion and the people who follow that religion, they don't want that. They see themselves as this state that should follow this religion because they are dominant in the society. It's very difficult to try and push that into practice. There's never really an answer to any of the problems that, you know, nations face. You know, it takes a lot of work. It takes generational work. It's never easy. But if you have people who are willing to take that path, who are willing to take the hard road instead of the easy road, then, you know, you might find that success sooner rather than later, you know. Hopefully you guys can understand what I'm trying to say here, you know. Hopefully you guys understand. Because I'm just taking examples like from my nation, from South Africa. We have 9 provinces. We have different racial identities in our country. We have different religions in our country as well. Yes, we've come from a time where our people were divided amongst racial lines, and it was very hard, and it still is hard even today, to try and reconcile ourselves and be united as one South Africa. It is extremely hard. It's still a work in progress. There are still racists out there. There are still people who are still thinking in their cultural mindset, in their tribalistic mindset. You know, instead of thinking about the entire nation of South Africa, they are thinking about their little enclaves, you know, and it's a work in progress. And what makes it worse is that, you know, if the political apparatus of the state is compromised or is paralyzed, you know, further down the chain or further down the pyramid, it becomes a very difficult situation, you know, trying to convince people that we should stay united as one people. We should always be as South African instead of separating ourselves into our provinces or making a whole new country. You know, it's very difficult when our leadership is not able to work for the people. They work primarily for themselves, you know, to eat the money for themselves, never able to serve the rest of the country. So yeah, you know, democracy, building a nation, it's hard work. It takes everybody, not just a few people, to do. It's an investment. It's an investment, and if you don't see it as a long-term investment, then it will fall. It will ultimately fall into the dust. Yeah, that's all I can say, guys. Building a society takes a lot of work. Yeah. Okay. That's it for today. Remember, if you want to check out the original video or check out Time Ghost History's YouTube channel, the links are in the description below. And if you like the video, remember to give me a like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Click on the notification bell if you want to be up to date with my latest videos. Sorry, my mouth is a bit dry. And yeah, I guess I'll see you next week, Tuesday. Okay? Bye-bye.